Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. If you happen to be a first time listener, I am Edward, otherwise known as the Lightkeeper, and welcome to this fabulous podcast where we talk about any and all things related to BDSM, DS, kink, even sometimes kind of dive into some poly conversations. But today, it's going to be one of those conversations. I don't know if this has happened to you, where during a week you sort of keep seeing the same behavior over and over from all different people, and it seems to be wherever you look, it seems to happen. And I've had one of those weeks, although the week has been actually fantastic. I can't tell you the last time the baseball team I follow, the New York Yankees, have lost. I think it was 8 games ago, which is in baseball terms um, quite a quite a long time because in baseball it's actually a game of failure rather than success. And when I say that, what I mean is the best hitters in baseball will fail 7 out of 10 times. And so you look at the failure rates in baseball, and you see something, and I guess that failure rate really even kind of comes over to the best teams. They're going to lose, you know, typically one out of every 3 games they play, or more. But that's kind of typical. If a team is going at a clip where they're winning 600% of their, 60% of their games, they're doing really well. And so this tear the Yankees have been on has been fantastic to watch. Plus, some of the players are just, I mean, hitting the baseball so hard and so far, it's just absolutely amazing to see, and something I haven't seen since I was a kid, seeing baseballs fly like that. So that's been kind of the excitement part of the week and the good thing. And the other good thing is they're no longer on the American West Coast, so they're no longer 4 hours different. So I am not having to stay up until 10:30 before the game even starts. And a typical baseball game is 2.5 to 3 hours long. So I was sort of maybe a little bit of a zombie last week because I stayed up to watch so many of the Yankees games. But it was fun and I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I did it. And besides, it gave me a reason to drink lots of coffee out of my very stylish former Yankee baseball bat that is now a coffee mug. So, yeah, good excuse to use all of that. So that's been kind of the excitement of my week. Now, on the flip side, the not so exciting things have really kind of actually all come out of the wonderful world of BDSM. And thankfully, it's not my brand new website, Chatting with the Lightkeeper. That has been fantastic. It's been a fantastic journey learning all about how to do all of that, learning some HTML, and yeah, boy, that's been a challenge. But that part of the BDSM world, lifestyle world for me has been fantastic and enjoyable. I've got the website up and running, fired up a Pinterest account. So if you're on Pinterest, come say hi, Chatting with the Lightkeeper there. But let's kind of get into what, I don't know, got me perplexed or just kind of a little bit of stymied, I guess we could say. The first thing that came to mind when this started happening is I grew up on a lot of folk music. So Bob Dylan was a voice that I heard often coming from the record player. And Bob Dylan has a song called Gotta Serve Somebody. And what was happening this week reminded me so much of that song because the whole point of the song from Bob Dylan is that no matter what you do as a person or what you are as a person, there's always somebody that you have to sort of bow down to, whether it's in your, say, your faith, whether it's in your line of work, you have to kowtow to a boss or a customer or a client, whatever. Everybody in this world has somebody that we have to serve in order to make it through the day. And what was happening and what I was seeing over and over in the lifestyle throughout the last week has been a whole lot of people who believe that a dominant is almighty. They are, they are Master Jesus Christ. They can walk on water. They can take one fish and feed 50 people, and they have disciples galore and all that good stuff. Um, they probably would admit to having a beard and long hair as well. I don't know, just sort of seems to be fitting. But they sort of have the Christ-like image of a dominant. And no dominant is, you know, God Almighty, or if you're a Jim Carrey fan, Bruce Almighty. Um, no dominant is that, because no matter your role, even if you're vanilla, we all, as Bob Dylan says, gotta serve somebody. And it just sort of kept getting brought up and seeing it over and over. My dominant doesn't like to be told what to do. My dominant refuses to be managed at work. And that one made me chuckle. I'm like, oh my God. So what you're saying is your dominant goes from job to job to job because they keep getting fired because they don't do what they're told to do. Nice. Good for you. And way to put a positive spin on it, that they're so dominant they just don't like being told what to do. None of us like being told what to do. Hello, but we all get told what to do at work. That's why it's work. That's why they pay us to do things that we don't necessarily want to do. That is the nature of the beast. And even if you do what you love, there are things in what you love that at times you don't love to do. Just how it goes. We all have to serve somebody. Um, for example, maybe you are a dominant and you're married and you have kids. Guess what? You got to serve those kids. You can't just thump your chest and say, I am dad, I am Dom, and you will go clean your rooms now. It doesn't work like that. Sorry. And of course, there is work. Work doesn't work like that, even if you're the boss, even if you own your own business. You still have to serve your customers. You still have to serve your clients, whatever you call it. You have to serve those who pay you so you can get yourself paid. There is no scenario out there where a dominant is almighty. And, you know, power dynamics in a relationship, there's an equality between a dominant and a submissive. And even in those relationships where it seems like the dominant makes all the choices and the submissive person consents to having this be this way, there is still, that has come through trust and experience and all those wonderful things. It didn't come because, the dominant, appeared from the heavens one day and said, I am dominant almighty and thou shalt follow me, submissive. It just doesn't work like that. So yeah, it sort of drove me nuts how this went. And for whatever reason, the funniest part is somebody responded with sort of their Dom is Dom Almighty, um, to one of my posts on my old Tumblr blog, which I'm still with the website now, not sure what I am going to do with my Tumblr world, whether it's going to get blown up or just sort of go on hiatus, or what I'm going to do with it. But that's a story for another day. Anyways, they were talking about their Dom Almighty, and for whatever reason, they talked about cheese grating, and that caused my brain to sort of short circuit, and rather than continue to process what they were saying, all I could think of was the British TV show personality Jeremy Clarkson, and there was a back, oh boy, I don't know when this was, but he was on a TV show called Top Gear about cars, and they had come to America, and he sort of will rant at times, and whether it's a character rant where he's ranting because he's supposed to be this ape-like person, or he truly feels this way, I couldn't tell you which is which. Um, but he was on a rant about fat Americans, how they put cheese on everything and eat through the dinners at Red Lobster. And so when the submissive was talking about Dom Almighty and their love of having grated cheese on every meal, I just like. tuned out what they had written and was just imagining Jeremy Clarkson ranting about the fat American putting cheese on everything and eating their meals at Red Lobster, which now that Red Lobster is in financial difficulty and closing, I do wonder where Jeremy's cheese loving obese Americans are going to go for their meals now. Um, yeah, that is a wonder. But yeah, there is so much out there about the almighty dominant, and when you see it, all I can think of is either the people who are doing this don't have a clue, um, or even if that's how the relationship works, when they're going off about the almighty dom, um, they've forgotten that their kink is not necessarily my kink, and that's okay. They've forgotten that other people have different yums than they do, and we shouldn't yuck on it. So yeah, it's just I've seen the Dom Almighty post a whole lot lately, and it just got me kind of worked up. So I needed to vent to you all about it and let you know that yes, you will see this and know that basically it's a crock of shit. Pardon my language there, but that's really the way it is because, we all got to serve somebody. I wish that things were such that I could play a little sliver of that Dylan song in the background while we chatted about it, but it is not that way. Even if I only release this episode on Spotify, I would have issues with that. So we're not going to do that. But if you're curious, whatever music streaming platform you use, it's called Gotta Serve Somebody. By Bob Dylan. Give it a listen. If you are, or I guess were a fan of the TV show The Sopranos, you will probably recognize it because it made several appearances in the show, most often when, Tony Soprano, the almighty mobster, was having to serve somebody. And if think about it, if you're a mobster and you are the mobster in the world and you still have to serve other people, um, yeah, when it comes to the dominance, you're gonna have to serve other people. You are not Dom Almighty. So, okay, rant over there. The next thing that's come up, and I've seen it often and often, and I think it's grows out of a misconception that sort of interlinked, I guess, with the myth of the almighty dominant. Um, grows out of that, and it's about empathy and how dominance people think dominants don't have empathy. So let's kind of start at the beginning. And this, I apologize if this is oversimplifying it, but I think sometimes people get confused as to what it means to what empathy actually means. And it just really means that you do your best to understand or share the feelings of another human being. It's like stepping into their shoes, like, stepping into their shoes and trying to see the world from their perspective. There are two different types of empathy. Um, and these have names. I did learn that when I looked this up for the show, just to make sure I wasn't talking out of my bum. But there's cognitive empathy, and that's the mental side of it. That's sort of when we use our mind and we try to do our best to envision what it must be like to be in their shoes when, say, a friend is going through a horrible experience, and it's something that we have not experienced, but we can think what it could be like for us to go through it, so we can perhaps better understand what our friend is feeling. So that's cognitive empathy. Then there is affective empathy, and this is the emotional one. This would be our friend who is going through the bad experience is feeling sad, and because they're feeling sad, perhaps they're even crying. We feel sad because they're sad. So that's affective empathy. And what got me thinking about this, like I said, is that there are people out there who believe dominants should not have empathy. Now, perhaps in a role playing situation, you role play with a submissive, that you don't have empathy. You don't care what feelings they're feeling because in that role play you are being selfish dominant and it doesn't matter what they're feeling. And typically, the lack of the empathy feeling is put on the dominant, although submissives can lack empathy as well. This is not just a something dominants do or some dominants lack. And in fact, I would dare to say, and please, if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments or, uh, hit me up on the social media and let me know I am full of crap with this. But if your partner, whether it's DS or a friendship or whatever sort of ship you have with somebody, if they lack empathy, they're sort of moving into narcissist land because really empathy is all about seeing the world through another person's lens as best we can. And a narcissist can't see the world through anybody else's lens with their own and how the world is, out to get them and it's somebody else's fault always. Um, it's very much a lack of empathy is perhaps a strong sign that this person might be um, on their way to narcissist cliffs to take a full-on header into the ocean of narcissism. And so empathy is something that's very important. And empathy is more than just a feeling, it's also a skill and it's an effective tool that we need to have in BDSM. It's a skill. As long as you can, as long as you are not a narcissist and care to understand how somebody that is important to you is feeling or what they might be feeling as best you can understand it, because sometimes we just cannot understand completely because we can't walk 100% in their shoes, what they're feeling. We can try to be empathetic, and it's a skill that we can get better at. And it's so important. To have in BDSM because we talk often about having lifestyle relationships be a safe place and not just for the submissive but for a dominant. We have to create with our partner or partners a safe space that we can go to with them to be vulnerable, to let them, see our scars, see our imperfections, be comfortable, even though it's uncomfortable, be comfortably uncomfortable to share these types of things with somebody. And that takes a safe space. And in order to create that safe space, empathy has to be one of the tools that lets us get there. Yes, we have to be honest and all these things, but empathy is something that's so important in creating that that same space. And yes, there are, like I said, there are times when a dominant may have to put on their authoritative hat and appear to not have empathy. Uh, and that's this whole empathy thing. I think that's one of the reasons why at times dominants do struggle because it can be very hard um, to hold somebody, for example, in DS that you genuinely care for accountable because we know the accountability methods because of empathy, either physically or mentally or both, might sting. They might hurt. And because we're empathetic people, we don't like to cause hurt or feel hurt, or feel that hurt on somebody else's behalf. So yeah, being empathetic and having empathy is part of what makes a dominant a dominant. And so there are people seriously out there that believe dominants shouldn't have empathy, and that makes me wonder if they're the ones that narcissists look to prey upon. But that's a podcast for another day. Let's talk about developing and getting better at our empathy skills because it is something we can get better at. And it's something that I've gotten better at as I've grown as a person. And I would like to think I've still got a lot of runway to get better. Doesn't mean I am a crappy person or don't feel empathy. That's not the case at all, but I just believe I can get better at this. Um, and there's really, you know, just a few things that we can do, but it makes all the difference. We can be active listeners, which means when our partner is talking to us, we make a conscious effort to listen without interrupting. Um, you let your submissive speak, which takes me back to a first date I had. It was uh, now sort of midway through the COVID craziness. Um, I know I had just been vaccinated, they had just been vaccinated, but we were still, um, conscious of how to work this because we didn't want to bring COVID to people that were around us. Um, but one of the things that always struck me to come out of that was the fact that they were shocked that I was a dominant and I listened. I listened to them. And I'm just like, wow, yeah, that's just part of being, you know, I just wanted to be like, well, who have you gone out with before that didn't listen? And how could they lead you if they didn't listen to you? But I was a good goober and bit my tongue. But yeah, it was just one of those moments that sort of stick with you. But you focus on listening and not interrupting. Let your partner talk. And then when it is, your turn to speak, and then you're talking about something that's obviously important, um, before or as part of your response, you sort of paraphrase what they've said to you so that they understand that you understand that I understand that. But bes- besides all that, you're actually showing that yes, you paid attention, you understand, and by paraphrasing back what they've said, they know you've listened and that you've understood. And if there is a misunderstanding, this way you can clear that misunderstanding up before it snowballs and becomes something big and leads to a disagreement. You're nipping the misunderstanding potential right in the bud by being a reflective listener and paraphrasing what is said. And part of all of this whole process of active listening is paying attention to nonverbal cues because you can tell by how somebody moves and their expressions or their tone of their voice, whether they're getting really riled up about something or whether something is really painful for them to share. All sorts of things come across, and when we pay attention and we are an active listener, we pick up on those. Now, we may not process them all correctly, which is where that reflective listening comes in. When we paraphrase back what we've picked up, we can find out whether we are correct, incorrect. But that's so important to having and doing with your partner or partners to build that trust, to build that safe place where you can continue to build and explore the depths that the lifestyle can take you. And the other thing that it can be a challenge and it doesn't necessarily feel natural because it's not, um, but is to have those emotional, regularly kind of scheduled check ins. And I mean, who wants to think like, have a reminder come up on their phone that, oh, hey, Friday night, it's not only is it date night, but it's emotional check-in night. Yay, where you get to sit down and you need to have those conversations where you ask, how are you doing? How are we, how do you feel we are doing? What could I do better? How have I been annoying you lately? All sorts of things like that. They're not fun conversations to have, but when you have them regularly, it keeps problems small and manageable. And when you have those regularly scheduled emotional check-ins, it's important to ask open-ended questions and then, practice our active listening and understand that whatever our partner shares with us, when they share how they feel, that their feelings are valid and their emotions are valid, and we acknowledge that. We may not fully understand the why they feel that way, um, especially when they first share that they're feeling perhaps upset at us for a certain reason. We may not understand the why part of that yet, but how they're feeling is valid because how we feel is valid. Our feelings are always valid, even perhaps maybe if the logic behind them is a little skewed. But everybody's feelings are always valid. And when we talk about them, it really, it helps us get through um, when our logic might be off or fix a problem before it becomes a big problem. And it makes our relationship stronger. Something, if you have a DS relationship, to consider doing this from time to time. Um, and it doesn't have to be for long periods. Maybe you do it just for an evening or a weekend or a day, whatever works. Do a role reversal day. Switch roles. Now, I know if you have a partner that's dominant almighty, this isn't going to fly. But switch roles. Take on the role, if you're the dominant, take on the submissive role and let your submissive dom you about for the day. You probably won't find it super enjoyable, just as your submissive is probably not going to find it enjoyable taking on the role of being dominant. But it helps, no matter what your role, it helps you see the other side. You are, in essence, walking in your partner's shoes. Now, in DS, a lot of times things that happen the way a dominant interacts, say, with a submissive, can be arousing. Um, but when you switch roles, those things that might be arousing, say for the submissive, are probably not going to be arousing for the dominant in the shoes of the submissive. But it's very kind of important to do that role reversal because it allows you to experience life in the other role. And it's eye opening. It really is. Give it a try with your partner sometime. It will open your eyes. It'll open both of your eyes or all of your eyes, depending on how many and how your partnership is structured. Another fantastic tool that helps is journaling. Journaling is great. You don't have to be Ernest Hemingway or you don't have to be Jane Austen to journal. Journaling isn't about perfect grammar or about sentence structure or writing a novel. All journaling is perhaps um, you and your partner or partners work on a certain topic for a week or 2 weeks, and you during that time you jot down what you think on that topic, and then you sit down and share what you've put together on it, and it helps you learn and grow and sort of think on a topic together, and it's enlightening, insightful, and helps everybody see points of view um, from the other side, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, something else that when we work on our empathy skills that we need to work on is our emotional literacy. And I don't mean by that learning how to feel things, like not becoming literate with, like, I'm not saying somebody's illiterate with feeling sad. They don't feel sad right, or they don't feel angry right, or they don't do happy right. And that's not what I'm saying. But with the sort of emotional vocabulary, what I'm talking about is to use better words to share how you feel. Because sharing how we feel can be hard. It can be kind of easy to say, I'm feeling numb today. But what does that really mean? What caused it? What does it feel like to feel numb? Does that mean you don't feel hungry, or does that mean you might feel hungry, but your brain is numb, so you can't figure out what you want to eat to cure the hunger. What does that mean? So being able to use better words to express and better words to understand what you're feeling. So that's something that we all can work on is finding the right or finding better words to express because sometimes there isn't a right word to use, but trying to find better words to express how we're feeling so that way we can be better understood. And it also, of course, helps when we use I statements. I feel concerned when you do this. I feel angry when you leave the toilet seat up. I feel upset when you don't replace the toilet paper. I don't know what's up with the bathroom stuff there, but it's what popped to mind as I'm talking, so I apologize for that. But we use I statements. I feel, I think, rather than using words when we don't use I statements, we can kind of come across as confrontational. It is very important that when we are communicating deeply and we're trying to build a respect and build our safe place and show empathy that we use non-confrontational communication. And finally, we need to have conversations about how we have conversations. That's called a meta conversation. So many, it's a pet peeve of mine here. So many people will say, "Oh, we need to have a meta conversation," which for some reason they seem to think means we're going to have a serious conversation. So rather than say we need to talk, which whenever somebody says, "Hey, we need to talk," I immediately know that means we need to have a serious conversation. But they'll say we need to have a meta conversation instead of we need to talk or we need to have a serious conversation about whatever. They'll say meta. And what that actually means, having a meta conversation, that's where you talk about what you communicate. That's where you sit down with your partner or your partners, you sit it down and you sit at the table and you say, when we talked about, you know, what had you upset the other night, we need to talk about how we communicated about that. I know I could have done better when I did blah, blah, blah. And it's a conversation about communication with, of course, the goal being how to get better at it. So have meta conversations. And remember, meta doesn't mean you need to have a serious conversation or we need to talk. A meta conversation is just about having a conversation about how to communicate better. Whether it's in a friendship, relationship, whatever, having those from time to time will improve your conversation skills, your ability to have them using, you know, words that better perhaps help your partner understand what you're thinking emotionally. All of these things work back to that grand old topic of better being, better at being empathetic with your partner, practicing empathy in the relationship. And finally, the last thing I will suggest as we go through this is take time for some personal reflection. I know it's something that we often don't do and we should do, and that is to have time to think about what we said, how we said it, what was said to us. What did our dominant or submissive or our partner say to us? How did we react to it? Self-reflection is so important because we learn sort of so much when we sit down and we make the time to reflect upon what all happened. We grow. And isn't that what we want? We want our relationships to grow. We want our partners, we want them to grow. And we want all of this growth to grow closer together. And it takes time, effort, work, and it takes being empathetic with your partners. It takes having empathy and it takes refining those skills and getting better at it. So that is what I have this week. So I no longer have visions of Jeremy Clarkson ranting about Americans with their cheese and Red Lobster. So thank you for letting me get that off my chest. And I guess if you ever do see Jeremy Clarkson in a restaurant and he's in the Americas, ask him if he wants cheese on whatever he's eating. That would actually, if I truly did see him in a restaurant, I would probably pay the waiter to walk over and ask if he would like cheese on whatever it was he was having. But anyway, um, please remember, dominants are not almighty. There is there's probably somebody out there who has, is Master Jesus Christ in whatever little community they're a part of. But that is a whole bunch of hogwash. It just doesn't work because, as Bob Dylan says, we all got to serve somebody. And dominants, as well as submissive switches, or just, generally kinky people in general, we all need to, you know, work on our empathy skills, be better at it. And if we do run into somebody in or out of the lifestyle who doesn't have empathy, I think they're just a short hop from being a narcissist. And remember, narcissists exist not just in the wonderful world of BDSM and kink, but they also, they are out there in the vanilla world, um, leading vanilla lives. So it's not just here in this wonderful, wacky world that we're going to encounter them. And empathy is sort of one of our defenses against narcissism. So let's work on those skills and don't accept it when you have somebody who professes to be a dominant and professes that empathy is crap. Know that, in at least in my opinion, for what it's worth, they're a hop, skip, and a jump away from being a narcissist if they aren't already. Um, so now that that's all out of the way, before we go, I would love it, please, if I could get your help. If you could head over to chattingwiththelightkeeper.com, poke around, and then let me know what you think. I have been looking at the site, obviously, quite a bit. And so I know I've missed things. Like I'm sure there's some bad grammar somewhere, and I'm sure there's a typo somewhere that, obviously the spell checking programs missed. I've done my best, but it's something that I have looked at so much that I know if that when I look at it anymore, I am going to be missing the forest because I am going to be seeing a tree or two right in front of me, and those trees will sort of like be my shiny things, and I can't see past them. So please poke around, take a look. Let me know what you find. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you don't like. Let me know some of the things that need to be fixed because I'm sure there are things that need to be fixed. But please take a look. Let me know, and besides that, I would really like you to take a look and hopefully I can maybe grow that. I've got some ideas on what I can do to maybe make it grow and be better. Which if all goes well, I'll share next week. My mind has been running on those. So I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. And please check out the website and with the podcast here itself. If you haven't, no matter where you're listening, please go ahead and tap that follow button. And all that's going to do is just let you know whenever a new episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper comes out, which, of course, is every week. So, thank you very much for setting aside the time to listen wherever you are. And I hope you are having a fabulous day and a fabulous week. And I can't wait to chat with you next week. So until then, be good and have fun.